Yeah, we'll do that. The curriculum says these are the events of Tuesday. We don't know for sure. I did mention to you yesterday that John essentially skips from Sunday or Monday to Thursday. And so all of what we're going to talk about today is found in the Synoptic Gospels because they spend their time, most of their time talking about the events, Jesus' more public events during that week. John is going to close ranks, and he's going to tell us what only he tells us is Jesus' time with his disciples in the last day of his life. And that's what chapter 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 are about. So we will get to that, but in the meantime, let's talk about some other things that happened during this time. So Jesus arrives in the city, and he begins to teach in the temple, as was his custom when he was there. And he's interrupted by the religious leaders several times with questions for him, test questions. They're testing him. They think that if they can trip him up with a wrong answer, they can get him arrested. They can have grounds to arrest him. So each of these, except for possibly the last one, is a setup. It's a question designed to make Jesus say the wrong thing. Like there was no answer that he could give that wouldn't get him into trouble. And we'll talk about that. So they're testing Jesus again so that they might arrest him. So the first question had to do with Christ's authority. We see this in Matthew 21. So the Pharisees are trying to trap him. They come together. They decide this is the question they're going to ask to trap Jesus. And when he entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came. So these are the leaders of the Sanhedrin. Came up to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority?" So by what authority are you teaching? Under whose authority? Because if a rabbi was teaching, he was generally teaching under the authority of his rabbi, right? And so under whose authority are you teaching? Now, here's the thing. They thought they had him caught because if he said, I teach under the authority of men, then he's not worth listening to. If he says, I teach under authority of God, well, they can say that he's blaspheming. So Jesus comes back with an answer that isn't an answer at all. He doesn't answer their question at all. Jesus answered them, I also will ask you one question, and if you tell me the answer, then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, from where did it come? From heaven or from man? So now the Jewish leaders have a problem. Because if they say, well, it's from man, the people are going to get angry with them. The people love John. If they say, well, it's from God, then Jesus will say, well, then why didn't you believe in him if he came from God? And that's exactly what we're told within the response. And they discussed it among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say to us, why did you not believe him? But if we say from man, we are afraid of the crowd, for they all hold John as a prophet. So they answered Jesus, we do not know. And he said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. So they come to Jesus thinking, we've got him. This is the question. And Jesus answers it so brilliantly, they're left speechless. Here's the thing, ladies in the back. They didn't realize it. They were arguing with God. Nobody wins an argument with God. God always wins. And nobody is going to win an argument with Jesus either. Years ago, like I was counting it up this morning when I was lecturing, it has to be over 20 years ago because we were in our old sanctuary, so this is before Layton was born, and Layton's 21. Our pastor gave a sermon on arguing with God and how dangerous it is for us to argue with God. And I still remember that sermon, and it had such a profound impact on me that when I was arguing with God about whether or not I should stop teaching Bible study at my church, I clearly felt the call to stop. I quit because I didn't want to be arguing with God. That's what they're doing. They're trying to argue with God, and it's not going to go well for them. So now another group comes up and asks a political question about taxes. And so we read that story here. The scribes and the chief priests, remember the scribes are the teachers, and the chief priests are the ones that do the sacrifices in the temple. So the scribes and chief priests sought to lay hands on him at that very hour, for they perceived that they had told this parable for they perceived that he had told this parable against them, but they feared the people. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be sincere that they might catch him in something. He said so as to deliver him up, so as to deliver him up to the authority and jurisdiction of the governor. So they're trying to get him arrested. So they asked him, "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful for us to give tribute, taxes to Caesar or not?" Interesting how they start here, isn't it? How do they approach? How would you describe their approach to Jesus? What do they say at the beginning before their question? Yeah, we know you're from God because you speak. And do they believe that? No, they don't. They're trying to trap him in a question to get him arrested. They are falsely flattering him. They're trying to catch him off guard, trying to make him feel like, oh, these are friends. These people believe in me, and then, pull their snare on him. And Jesus, of course, was aware of that. Now, this idea of needing to pay taxes to Caesar was very divisive. Generally, the Jews hated it, in part because they hated Rome and they didn't want Rome ruling over them, in part because the taxes were too high. We just got our tax returns back yesterday, and anybody who pays taxes is like, this was way too much. I shouldn't be paying this much in taxes, right? And they felt that way about it. And indeed, the Romans did exact quite a bit of tax. But to make matters worse, there were Jews that became tax collectors. And they were allowed to take as much money as long as they paid whatever Rome asked for. They were allowed to charge the people whatever they wanted above that and keep that money for themselves. That's why tax collectors were hated so much. And you even had these two different groups. You had the Pharisees or the Sanhedrin. You had the Herodians, which the name would imply that they were part of Herod's group, and they were not religious. They didn't care about being Jews, religiously. They were just Jews by birth, but they didn't care about the faith. And so the leadership and the Herodians hated each other, but they had one thing in common. There's this saying that says, politics makes strange bedfellows. People who hate each other will come together to get rid of a common enemy. And their common enemy was Jesus. They wanted to get rid of Jesus. So they come up with this question that's going to tick everybody off, or to everybody, no matter how he answers it. somebody's going to be angry about it. If he says, yes, pay taxes to the Jews, then the Jews are going to be angry. If he says, no, don't pay taxes to the Jews, then the Romans are going to be angry. So again, they thought they had him caught in a trap. But he perceived their craftiness and said to them, show me a denarius, a coin. Whose likeness and inscription does it have? They said, Caesar's. He said to them, then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they were not able in the presence of the people to catch him in what he said, but marveling at his answer, they became silent. So he asked them for a coin. By the way, what does the fact that the Jewish leaders had Roman coins say about them? They were participating in keeping Rome in business. They were themselves using Roman coinage, the coinage of the enemy. And so they were completely immersed in Roman culture. And so Jesus explained, look, what you owe to Caesar, taxes, pay to Caesar. But what you owe to God, spiritually, pay to God. And so he was not caught in that. Next, the Sadducees have a turn, and they have a question about the resurrection. There came to him some Sadducees, those who deny that there is a resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, having wife but no children, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now, there were 7 brothers. This is a hypothetical now. There were 7 brothers. The first took a wife and died without children. And the second and the third took her, and likewise all 7 left no children and died. Afterward, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had her as wife. What is ironic about their question? They don't believe in the resurrection. They don't believe in the resurrection, and they're asking Jesus about the resurrection. So here's the question in essence. There are these 7 brothers. A woman marries the oldest one. He dies. She doesn't have a child, so she marries the second. He dies, doesn't have a child, so she marries the third. He dies, she doesn't have a child, so she marries the fourth, and onward through all the brothers. So obviously this isn't a true story, and she's a really bad bet as a wife. I wouldn't marry her because all her husbands keep dying. But here's the thing. This is what I mentioned yesterday. This is based off of levirate marriage, which was intended to provide for women. It was intended to protect women. Because the only way a woman could be cared for was by her husband or by her sons, by her children. She could not make money for herself. So it was designed to protect women. But let's get back to the question. So they're asking, and they think he can't answer this. Because she can't be everybody's wife. And she, so whose wife is she? And so here's what Jesus answers. And Jesus said to them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to attain to that age, to heaven, and to the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage. For they cannot die anymore, because they are equal to angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. But that the dead are raised, even Moses showed in the passage about the bush, where he calls the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. Now, he is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him. Then some of the scribes answered, Teacher, you have spoken well, for they no longer dared ask him any question. So, 2 parts to this question. The first answer, what does he say about whose wife is she in the resurrection? What's his answer to that? There's no marriage in heaven. Now, That upsets some married people. Some people are like, but generally, people who are happily married are like, well, I want to be married in heaven. Here's the deal. Uh, I think, now this is just like, this isn't gospel. This isn't, I can't give you chapter and verse for this. But this is what I believe. I believe we have a very low view of heaven. And I think, heaven is depicted as we're going to all be together, having a party, having fun. And I believe that I'm not saying heaven will be fun, but I believe we will all be so overwhelmed and so awed when we see Jesus for who he really is. When we see God for who he really is, that we will be compelled in the best possible sense to worship. He will be all that we need. I think we'll know each other. I think we'll relate to one another. But I don't think there's a need for marriage anymore because we'll relate to each other perfectly. Everything will be perfect, including our relationships. So that's my take on it. I can't prove that biblically. Oh, I can prove the part, but about marriage, I can't prove that. But then he says something more than that, right? He says there is a resurrection. So there's and he quotes in the book of Moses in Exodus, where God says, "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Not I was the God, meaning that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were still alive, not on earth, but in eternity. And so they're trapped again. They say, "Teacher, you've spoken well." And they have no other answer. And then finally, the book says that all four of these groups, or the three groups, and then the last one's just one man, are trying to trip him up. I'm not so sure, but I think this guy is sincere. And so it says this. And one of the scribes, one of the teachers of the law, came up and heard them disputing with one another. And seeing that Jesus answered them well, asked him which commandment is the most important of all. So it doesn't say he's trying to trip him up. The others clearly, it says they do. It says that he's really impressed with Jesus' answers. So he asks, which commandment is the most important of all? Jesus answered, the most important is Hear, O Israel, the Shema, the most important verse in all of Judaism. The Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. So the scribe comes up and asks, which is the greatest commandment? This teacher of the law asks this, and this Jesus answers by saying we are to love God with all that we are and all that we have. And we're to love others as we love ourselves. I think it was Augustine that said, love God and then do what you please. Because if we truly love God, it will be our desire to obey him and to love others. And so we are to love God. If we truly love God, we will love others. And then finally here, for this part, I meant to read this. And the scribe said to him, you are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one, and there is no other besides him. And to love him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, and with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself is much more than all the whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered wisely, the scribe, Jesus said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And after that, no one dared ask him any more questions. So Jesus takes the initiative in these conversations, in these interchanges with the Jewish leadership. Jesus reveals their ignorance. They think that they have him caught. And the Pharisees are confounded by him. They are not able to trip Jesus. So while they were ignorant of who Jesus was, at the same time, the great throng heard him gladly. The people uh, uh, heard him and were glad and rejoiced in him. Jesus also revealed the hypocrisy of the leadership. Jesus' most scathing, most harsh words were reserved for the Jewish leadership, for the Pharisees, for the Sadducees, for the Sanhedrin, for the scribes, for the priests. He called them hypocrites. He called them blind guides. He called them fools. He called them whitewashed tombs filled with dead men's bones. He called them murderers and serpents and a generation of snakes. He called them cups that are clean on the outside and full of dirt and all other kinds of bad things on the inside. Jesus accused them of pride and egotism and laziness and as sending souls to hell. Why? Why was Jesus so harsh on the Jewish leaders? Yeah, Sage.
They're supposed to be leading the people like to God and
Absolutely, absolutely right. They're leading them, right? They're leading them astray. They're leading people away from God, not to God. And Jesus here, with his words, is trying to overcome that misteaching, that lostness. And he would soon give his life to overcome their lostness as well. Now, Jesus teaches on the Mount of Olives. This is a picture from the Mount of Olives looking toward Jerusalem, looking across the Kidron Valley. That dome is where the temple would have been in Jesus' day. It is a mosque now. And then Jesus arrives in Bethany. This is the story of the anointing of Jesus. The book, the curriculum says that John got it wrong, got the timing wrong, saying it was 6 days before Passover. The synoptics say it was 2 days before Passover, so Wednesday. Here's the thing. John doesn't say that the dinner took place 6 days before Passover. He says that he arrived in Bethany 6 days before. So we've already talked about this, and so we won't talk about it in great detail, but I do want you to be able to fill out your blanks. So in talking about Mary, it says Mary's act is the act of one who truly loves the Lord. For one who truly loves the Lord, no gift, no service is too great. And then Jesus' words to her, Judas's words to the people there that it should have been sold and the money given to the poor, is the attitude of one who pretends to love the Lord. He's trying to look holy in this and say we should do something better with this than just pour it all out. But he was wanting the money for himself. He was pretending to love the Lord. And then Jesus' answer back to Judas shows that he knows men's hearts. He knows what is in a man, as John said earlier. And Jesus wasn't saying when he said the poor, you'll always have the poor with you. This was intended for my burial. He's not saying don't take care of the poor. But he is saying that at this point in history, this is what Mary was doing was perfectly right. So that's it. I'm not going to give you the quiz right now because I don't think we'll finish it in time. And I didn't copy it off because I didn't think we'd get this far. So we will do that first thing on Monday when you get back. I also don't want to give you homework. So we'll do that on Monday when you get back. Everybody got that? Okay, that's it for today.